Good morning, short fiction class, and welcome back to unit number 2. Thank you so much for all of the work that you've been doing last week, and I hope that you've had some time to enjoy the past holiday weekend. Thank you, Mackenzie, for crafting us this beautiful banner for our class landing page. I think everyone's represented here. And I welcome anyone else who'd like to send a class banner to me, sort of in a different configuration or organization for extra credit. So thank you again. Unit 1 recap, a few quick moments. We were thinking about theme this week, and I would like you to continue to think about theme as we enter into the sort of different short stories throughout the coming weeks. But we first began with your themes in terms of these wonderful additions to both things that I might want to look at, and perhaps you would too, some further reading, some further viewing opportunities. So thank you, Mackenzie, for this idea about the real bad Arabs and thinking about what is theme. Theme, again, is sort of thinking about ideas that underlie the story. How does it hold the story together? It's not just what the subject of the text or the media is, but actually the underlying story, the actual underlying meaning of the story. And so continue to think about that theme. I'm sure this is review for most of you, but it's important that we kind of review some of these terms as a class. So we had some references to Star Wars and A Mortician's Tale. It's a video game, fantastic, Pan's Labyrinth, a text called The Black Sheep, a book and also a film called Unbroken, The Notebook, also a book adapted into film, When Breath Becomes Air. Thank you for that contribution. Moulin Rouge, some great reading here. Odd Thomas by Dean Koontz, The Princess and the Frog, a movie called 1917, The Cruel Prince, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, Big Hero 6, Big Time Adolescence, another film. Wonderful, Coach Carter. And for this week, we're going to be doing narrative structure and point of view. So basically, narrative structure, thinking about plot. What is the relationship between theme and plot? Just as theme is the thread of thought that binds all the elements to the narrative, so too plot is the thread of actions that carries the story to exemplify the theme. So the different pieces that fit together to sort of craft that theme. And so I've incorporated a whole bunch of different terms here. I only want you to define one of them. The readings accompanied to sort of explain what these terms are. But I want you to just build out one slide deck page to represent just one of these terms. So once someone addresses one of these, please choose a different term to define. So that'll be a fun activity this week, thinking about what includes narrative structure or plot, and then point of view, who's telling the story, and why is that important to know. I only have great things to say for your collaborative reading as well. Thank you so much. I found that we were maybe a little claustrophobic in this text because it was so short and there were so many of you commenting. So I assure you that in the coming weeks, we'll have 2 short stories that are much longer to read. And so you'll have much more sort of space to sort of investigate and consider. One of my favorite parts of this reading about this essay by John Cheever is when he talks about short stories as nomadic. And I asked you to think a little bit about how movement is a sort of important theme here. In the short stories of my esteemed colleagues and in a few of my own, I find those rented summer houses, those one-night love affairs, and those lost keyrings that confound traditional aesthetics. We are not a nomadic people, but there is more than a hint of this in the spirit of our great country, and the short story is the literature of the nomad. And so thank you for those of you who commented on this section, and everywhere, in fact. This is just one spot I'm going to highlight. So Jenny, you said, I love the imagery here. These 3 simple things carry the power to transport us back in time to the moment we experience them. Each moving through our lives quickly, but leaving a footprint in memories. A house is just a house, but a rented summer house instantly recalls the time spent there, the activities and the people that time was shared with. Absolutely. And I think shared stories, short stories are all about thinking about how to sort of condense and sort of invigorate those immediate responses, conjure those sort of immediate aesthetics. And then Jenny and Theo, you responded here. I think you made a great point. So thank you again for being so considerate of your classmates and really putting each other in dialogue rather than having sort of separate comments that exist in isolation. You said, when I read Rented Summer Houses, I knew very well it was the summer house in Cheever's mind, but somehow I also thought of my own and the ones I had seen a long time ago. So thank you. So the things that this image conjures. And then we have another thread here thinking about the theme of memory that underlies the essay. There's a feeling of nostalgia and somewhat melancholy in the way Cheever acknowledges the spirit of the nomad. I think you also see this in the short story, The Swimmer. And thank you again for those wonderful Google sites. You guys have been doing so great. I think the first week is there's always a learning curve. You have to figure out how to use a slide deck. You have to figure out how to create a Google site, and then also how to comment in sort of the shared collaborative reading document. So you're well done on all three of these. We'll be consistently returning to these kind of three modalities in the coming week. So if you can sort of do such a fantastic job that first week, I'm sure you'll have no problems in the coming weeks. I'm applying that same kind of collaboration for these. Elena, you followed up and said it's interesting that you thought first of memory here, because when I was reading it, I first connected it to movement and then memory. Your comment helped me better see the memory displayed in the sentence. I thought of movement because people used to be nomadic and no longer are, but short stories can connect us to the essence of the past. So absolutely, well said, Elena. And thank you for, again, having these nice dialogues together with each other and saying, this is how I read what you said and this is how I'm interpreting it. Alicia, you said, I chose this sentence because it's calling short stories the literature of the nomad, people of no permanent abode traveling from place to place. And Betsy, you followed up. Thanks for defining that term. I really like your perspective on that, and I totally agree. Short stories are meant to not be long, that a story can be short enough to be moved from person to person. And it's short, but also very easy to retell, which I find amazing. And I think, absolutely, I think something that's really interesting about this essay is that it shows sort of the sort of unflattering position short stories perhaps arrive at in terms of that particular genre. And so John Cheever's trying to redeem them in a certain way. And I hope that throughout this class we see sort of the value in reading something that's short, pointed, and well crafted. I hope you're excited for this week, Unit 2. We're thinking about plot, narrative structure, and point of view through the lens of Guy de Maupassant's French story, The Necklace, otherwise known as La Perruque. And it was published in 1893. So here's an image from the actual magazine Gil Blas, in which it was published in Paris. The sort of short story is really fascinating. And one of the things that I like to talk about with Guy de Maupassant is this idea that he's writing in the 19th century and is famous for his compact and dramatic narrative lines. He's very minimalistic. You're not going to have some sort of the same kind of flourish and characterization that you get in some of the other readings we'll be doing for this class. And he has been critiqued also for a lack of sentimentality of his characters, kind of creating them in more of like a kind of a caricature rather than some sort of fully formed, fully sort of realized people. For example, the little clerk's wife in The Necklace, she gets no sympathy for what happens, and you'll see if you're sort of familiar with this famous story, loses a diamond necklace and spends the rest of her life trying to pay off the one that she's replacing it with. So I really hope you enjoy this week. Just a brief note on Guy de Maupassant. He writes his own analysis of how he creates fiction and lengthy. He has a preface to his novel, and he writes about what it means to be a fiction writer. It's called The Writer's Goal. Again, this is in translation. He writes, instead of fabricating an adventure and spinning it out in a way that keeps it interesting until the end, the writer will pick up his characters at a certain point of their existence and carry them, by natural transitions, to the following period. He will show how minds are modified under the influence of environmental circumstances, and how sentiments and passions are developed. In this fashion, he will show our loves, our hates, our struggles, and all kinds of social conditions, and how social interests, financial interests, political interests, and personal interests all compete with each other. And so I think that really crystallizes what's going to be happening in The Necklace for you. And so for this week, please read the short story. You can click on it here. This should open to our shared collaborative document. I'm asking you to to incorporate 4 comments. So just a moment, I'll show you. There's 2 readings. Every week you'll have 2 readings. So The Necklace short story by Guy de Maupassant, and then Henry James has a follow-up story that's directly sort of in conversation with this short story called Paste. By the time James wrote Paste, he had been reading Maupassant's writing for nearly 2 decades, and he readily acknowledges that the necklace is his source. Quote, he says, "It seemed harmless sport simply to turn that situation round." In James's version, the diamonds become pearls and the plot is reversed, but he realized these superficial changes weren't quite enough. And so think a little bit about adaptation this week as well. What plot structures does Henry James co-opt? What does he make his own? And what does he mimic from Guy de Maupassant? So there's 2 short stories, and I'd like you to include 4 comments between both of them. You can always include more comments if you wish. That I'm very welcome to those. But I'd like at least 2 comments for each story, and then 2 replies all together. So 1 for each is fine, 1 for each short story is fine. And so I think you'll see that there's a lot more space to be saying and sort of elaborating on your comments this week. So 2 short stories, 4 comments, 2 for each, and then 1 reply for each by Friday. So another quick note that this week's schedule, we're going to be working on a Wednesday, Friday submission schedule. So by Wednesday, you'll have your slide deck completed, your initial comments for each of the short stories, and then also your Google Sites. You're going to build out 1 more Google site, and I'll explain that to you in just a moment. So what I'd like you to do is to build out your portfolio. Last week you did a wonderful job creating your About Me, your welcome pages, and this week I'd like you to create another portfolio site. And I'd like you to title it, you can simply title it Unit 2, whatever you sort of choose. Unit 2, you can name the text that we're reading, some way to designate what we're doing in Unit 2. You could name it Plot and Point of View. And I want you to answer one of the following questions on your Google site. And again, post this initial discussion board by Wednesday, and have 2 replies due by that Friday. So any of these questions: why do some people seek to own clothing or jewelry that's beyond their means to afford it? Why do you think what do you make of the relationship between the 2 short stories? In what ways does Henry James's Paste build from the necklace? And in what ways is the story explain something very different? And then another question you could consider is, how does the point of view in each offer different reader experiences? Please include a picture of your choosing to accompany your response. I prefer a picture that could be that you yourself took, something that you might have on a phone or computer, and connect and respond or support in some way your answer to one of the questions above with that picture. So it shouldn't be kind of a random picture, but should be related to whatever you're saying in your discussion board post. So build out that page, publish it, and then copy and paste the link to our discussion board, which you can click on here and create. So create thread, you could say Unit 2, title it however you want, paste your link, and then reply to 2 other students by Friday. So again, just to recap, this week we're working on Guy de Maupassant. You have 3 things due on Wednesday, which is the slide deck entry, your reading comments, just the comment portion, 2 for each short story, and then your initial discussion board post. By Friday, I'd like you to have replied to 2 comments on our shared slide deck. You can, of course, do that before Friday if you wish, and then respond to 2 peers' other portfolio pages by Friday as well. And you can do that most of the time before Friday. So I hope you have a great week. I hope you enjoy sort of the pacing of this week, and really have fun with these 2 short stories. Very traditional, kind of classic short story before we get into some less traditional short stories. Have a wonderful week, and I'm really enjoying working with you.